Now let's get to the fun stuff. Object manipulation. Let's mess with this default cube. So if I click on it, that's how you select an object. And you can see up here in the Layers tab, the cube has been selected and we got this orange outline around the whole thing. And from here, I can press G and move it around any which way. But if I want to be specific in where I'm moving it, I can go to an orthographic view. And in this case, I'm moving it along Y. Or I can go into this Y view, and now I'm moving along X and Z. Another thing you can do while still in object mode, which we'll get into all that stuff in a second. If I press GY, I can move it along the Y-axis. And I press escape to back out. If I press GX, you're moving along the X-axis. I can also press escape to back out. Or GZ, and you can move it around the Z-axis, so top to bottom. Now, if I want to start manipulating points on this, I can go to the edit mode. So by pressing tab, so back to this object mode, and this is edit mode. So you can see up here, object, edit, cool. Right now we're in vertex select. So what a vertex is it's a point. So I can click on a point, I press G, move it around. Now as you can see, since I was in a 3D view, it's moving wherever it feels like. So if you want to be more exact with it, I can move along an axis. So right now I can adjust things in X and Z, and you will see that it will stay only amongst those axes. Now if I press Control Z a couple times, I can go back to where I was. Now say if I want to grab a couple points, I can click on one and then hold Shift and click on the other. Now I have both points selected. Now I can click and drag both those points after pressing G and then just bring it over. So press G and then click, and then it'll be wherever you want it to be. Press Control Z a couple times, go back. Say if I want to grab this whole face, I just click and drag, and now we have the whole face. So move that wherever. Let's say if I wanted to grab all these vertexes, you can try to do that. However, it's not going to grab this back vertex. Do that, you would have to click on this X-ray view up here. Click and drag, and now you can get vertexes that you can't see in the viewport. So if we go back, now we have everything selected. We can grab it wherever. Next, let's say you don't want to grab just a point. Let's say you want to grab an edge. You can either come up here and click on Edge Select, and you grab an edge. Or, if I go back to Vertex, you can press 1 for Vertex, 2 for Edge, or 3 for Face. Personally, I like to do the hotkeys, but these options are also available to you. So again, edges, you can grab a whole edge. You can grab 2 or 3 edges, which in that case, that doesn't really do anything other than kind of grab a face. And you can have fun doing that. Same concept and principle as vertexes. Now, if we go to face, similar thing. You can grab here and here. Grab these 2 faces, whatever you want. Now, go back to vertex. Another thing we can mess with too is scaling. So if I press S and just drag my mouse to the left or right, we can scale an object. I can click and that'll be where I want it. Or if I press S2, for example, it will double the size of the object. Or for example, S.5, it will shrink it by double. All right, then let's take a look at some other things. Now, if I press the N key, you can see this section comes up. You can see the item itself, so you can see the dimensions. And we'll get into some of these other things later. But for right now, dimensions of the default cube, you can see that they are increasing. Right now, we got 2 meters across the board. So X, Y, and Z, this whole cube is a 2 meter by 2 meter by 2 meter. This is very helpful for figuring out the dimensions of your vehicle, which is also very helpful getting it to be the right real world size, especially when you're putting it in environments, because the lighting, for example, when we get down to it, way down at the end of the tutorial, if you have a 300-watt bulb, it's going to do it the way it would do in real life. So if you had an object and you didn't care about scaling and you're making it the size of like a Hot Wheels toy, this light is going to seem really bright on it. Where if you made it really huge and it was the size of a skyscraper, your lighting is going to be super dim. So you're going to have to adjust your lights accordingly. So I feel like it's always helpful to make it the exact right size. That way your lighting and your environment, it all reflects what a real world lighting would look like, and it's just going to be more accurate. Of course, if you're making a scale model, we'll get into that too as far as adjusting the heights. But to adjust these different things, if I wanted to adjust Z, say if I wanted to make it 4 meters tall, I can go 4. Or if I wanted to be very exact with this Y, I could be like 5.236. This would be 5,236 millimeters. I press enter, and then you got your Y, and then I go 2.124, whatever. That's 2,124 millimeters wide. And then that's how you can get the basic building blocks for your dimensions, so you know that your car is built to scale. That's something we're going to continue to dive down the line, but something helpful to bring up now. All right. Now we talked about the basics of that object manipulation, let's have a little fun with it. If I go back to edit mode and we just go to all these points, I'm going to show you how you can quickly make some surfaces. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to get rid of all this stuff down here. I just want this plane. Then I'm going to scale this out. So I clicked and dragged, and I press G and Y, move that out here. Next thing you can do, you can press Control and R, and this is going to create an edge loop. So if I go back, if I press Control R and click, it'll be right in the middle of the object. If I do it on the edge over here, it's going to do it lengthwise. Now, if I press Control R and scroll, I can have 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever, however many of these I want. Now, I'm just going to do it right here. Control R and click, and then you can adjust where this moves. You can press G twice, and this will slide along the side. Now I'm going to put this off center. I'm going to press G and Z, and now we have this angle formed right here. Now the thing is, if you haven't put any modifiers or done anything on this, all your objects, it's going to be flat like this. That's the default. But if you want to give it some curve, go back, you have to add some modifiers to it. So over here is the modifier properties, which is this wrench. We go to add modifier and subdivision surfaces. We click on it. Now we're going to start to get some curves with this. But you can see everything is still faceted. One way to get rid of this, we can right click and shade smooth. Now everything's smooth, but you can still see we got all this jagged areas through here. So what we can do is we can click on the viewport. We increase it to 2. I like to keep it at 2. This is will increase the quality, so you can go 3, 4, whatever, and you can see how these edges are getting cleaned up. Really, for most of what you're going to do, you just want it at 2, and the higher you raise this up, the more polys you're going to do, and you're going to start to slow down your system, which really for the modeling part of it, just about any computer can handle the modeling part. Where it gets tricky is once you get into rendering with cycles and Eevee, and that's when your computer can start to lag if you don't have, something awesome. Or even if you do have something awesome, especially if you get into, environmental texturing, things can get really heavy really, really fast. So I like to keep it at 2 and render at 2. And this is the quality when you're actually rendering things. Okay, so we got it at 2. And what you'll notice here too, lots of 2s I'm saying. Anyways, you see things are curved up over here. If we wanted to change that, now these edge loops are getting compressed. I'm compressing over here and developing a corner. We're not worried about that right now. We're just trying to develop a curve. So this is starting to look pretty good. We got these vertexes selected, and notice how it's not directly in the middle. So if it's directly in the middle, you're going to kind of have this lazy curve. Everything is going to be very consistent from one section to the other, which doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. You look at a lot of products, like Apple products or whatever, things with like a cylindrical shape. It can be very, I guess, logical and maybe approachable. And for some things, you want that. So, for example, the Volkswagen Bug, everything there's not a whole lot of dynamic movement with the curves. It is a bit more stable. That's one way of expressing design. However, if I move things this way, this is inherently more dynamic. And when people say dynamic, oftentimes I feel like this is like a designer word. They're just like, oh yeah, it's dynamic. And it's said so much, it doesn't mean anything. But what that means is just there's a variation of change. And if we're looking at this point to this point, you can see this side is a lot longer than this side, this edge. Because of that, there's a tension there. There's a tension between something large and something small. And so that creates some interest, and there's an acceleration to this curve. This curve, if you were like a race car or something, you're going through this curve, going slow, and then you're exiting out fast. And those are the kind of things that possibly give the vehicle excitement. So if you have designing like a Lamborghini, for example, you're probably going to be using a lot of curves like this, in which there's less of that stability there. There's a bit more of that tension and excitement there because you're designing an exciting product. That's more that new money type feeling. They want to show off. They want to express themselves. You don't want something that could be considered to be stable and boring or whatever. This could be kind of like maybe like a Rolls Royce, which you want it to be like a brick house. They want that stability. They want that. It's like all about that old money, that kind of feeling, and that's also great too. It just depends on your brand and who you're trying to cater for. Anyway, we'll talk more about that stuff later. Just some things to think about. All right, and if I press Control R again, I can have a curve in which it's going, hold on. I went into wireframe mode. We can talk about that stuff later too. So I just did a curve down here. So right now we have sort of a two-dimensional curve. And what I mean by that is, we got this curve and it's only going across in one view. However, it's dead flat in another. So all cars, or at least most cars anyway, I'm sure there's some obscure ones, or I bet even the Cybertruck has some curve to it, but who knows? I've never seen one in real life. All right, if we drag this up, now we're giving this something that's called crown. So now we're giving a three-dimensional curve in which we got it curved both in the side view and here front to back. And this is what gives something an automotive type surfacing. And we can adjust this. We can go left or right. And really, if we made it look accelerating in this view and it's accelerating in this view, then that's going to create very interesting surface. Now, let's mess with the matte caps so we can see things better. So if I go to the arrow, I go matte cap, and we grab this metal, this could be, more interesting surface. One of my teachers, he worked for Audi back in the day. He was talking about what makes something look expensive. And if I if I press Shift A, we can mess with different types of objects. So in this case, I'll just go to cube. Press Shift Y, move this forward. Now, if you were to take a 2x4, we were saying, or just piece of wood, and just go through a bandsaw and just cut it, and it's just everything's totally flat. This is a lot less effort than making something like this. This is one step. This is just cutting it down. The next step, I'm just going to duplicate this, just save a little time. Oops. Let me go back. And then this is going to be something I talk about more. Over here, if I click on this, this is auto merge vertices. So if I click, I press G twice, I can drag it over. So now we have a curve in 2 dimensions and a curve in 3 dimensions. So this is inherently cheaper because it's one process, just sliding through a bandsaw. Then this is more expensive because it would be like if you took that same piece of wood and you grab something in order to warp and manipulate it in one way. That's a separate process, more expensive. Then this would be even more expensive because you're warping it in one way and then you're warping it in another way. So these are the kind of things that no one really talks about, at least on YouTube. But these are the kind of things that make something feel more automotive, more expensive, and these are the kind of things that will, help your vehicles stand out and give it that quality. Because a lot of times you're like, hey, I gave it all this dashed axle, did whatever. This form manipulation, this is that last little bit of touch to make it come through. And if we're just to put it all together, just running through everything. So if I press Shift A, I clicked on a plane, cool. I press Tab, we got all the vertexes. I press G, Y, Control R, click, move it across. GZ, now we got a curve. Grab the whole object by pressing Tab, subdivide, click on the viewport, right click, smooth. I know that's a lot of steps already, but it gets easier. And then once you have the modifiers in place, then it's really easy to start manipulating things, pulling it across. And for anyone who is an Alias user from back in the day, you realize how incredible this is already. To move and adjust objects like this, just not possible with this kind of speed in something like Alias, even though now they're using subdivide stuff. But we'll talk about later the advantages of doing a program like that versus doing a program like this. Just want to do a basic rundown, show some object manipulation. But for now, if you want to start practicing doing some various surfacing, feel free to do that. Practice grabbing objects. So again, Shift A, find an object, scaling. If you press Shift D, you can grab other objects, copy and paste. You can scale it in different directions, make yourself like a little cityscape. I don't know what the hell I was trying to say. and just sort of have fun with it. Other things you may want to consider, or at least know about too, and we'll probably talk a bit more about this later, is adjusting things in Poly. So if you wanted to create an edge, you create an edge loop and drag it through, create another edge loop, and now you got an edge. And because the reason why this works anyway is your edge loops determine how much curve there is. So between these 3 points, your curve is trying to make as gradual of a curve as it can between these vertexes. So start point here, it would just go straight. But this set of vertexes is dragging it up or down. So if I grab all these vertexes, you can see the higher I bring it up, the softer this is becoming, or more rounded. But if I grab this, now this curve is trying to go from here to this point and then to this point. So it's trying to flatten out here and then go directly across here. Then if I grab another edge loop, it's going from this point, and because this is basically a flat line, it's going flat, then trying to go from this vertex to this vertex, so also straight, and same all the way across there. That's how you create your creases. Now, I'll see some people, they'll try to kind of cheat the system, and they'll do something where they'll press like Shift E and then numpad 1, and they'll do a crease. And that's one way to do it. I don't like doing anything like that because you don't have control over your lines. So for example, you can't do something like this. If I press Control R, I press G a couple times, I do the same thing over here, press G a couple times. Then if I come over here, grab this vertex, and I press G to slide. Same thing over here, press G a couple times to slide. And I back out of that. You can go from a sharp to a soft. You have a lot more control over all these things, and this is another thing in which we'll go over when the tutorial progresses to the actual vehicle part. And for now, I think that covers just about everything. We talked about edge loops, vertex selection, scaling, moving things around, subdividing surfaces. These are the basic fundamentals for making automotive or really any hard surfaces. And that's it for now.